Hey, so in my weight loss video, I talked about spending your mental time adopting the state. And I wanted to make a point about this that it just seems like nobody really talks about. And I'll preface this with a caveat that maybe this is just me. I'm not going to say this is definitely what this means for you or anybody else, but I do think that as humans, we are mostly built the same way, and I think often people just don't talk about what some of these things actually end up playing out like in real life. Sometimes when you adopt the state of something, when you imagine an outcome, let's say, which is, I guess, what you're supposed to do, right? If you want to achieve something, you imagine yourself at the point where that thing has been achieved. That doesn't just make the achievement happen. And often it doesn't just mean that you go through a series of obstacles or whatever to get from point A to point B. It doesn't just mean that you trip through a series of magical events where the universe just brings you whatever you want. Often, I think, it ends up being you are then presented with mental challenges that transform you into the person that occupies that state. So you are poor and you want to be rich. I guess if your imaginal scene does not involve feeling rich, but simply having money, you could potentially end up, or you will end up in that exact scene with those exact feelings, whatever they are. So there's having a thing, and then there's being the type of person that belongs with the thing, if that makes sense. So you can imagine yourself into having a car, but if you're not the kind of person that belongs with that car, then you'll just be you with that car or whatever. Whereas if you imagine yourself being the type of person that belongs in that car, you will transform mentally and in other ways. So you will not only belong in that car, but you'll be a different type of person, if that makes sense. For me, getting the things that I wanted fully, the way that I wanted them, has required certain things to happen to me emotionally. It wasn't specifically when I made the video about adapting the state for weight loss. It's not simple. It wasn't like I just adopted the state and then, sailed through this time where when I felt like eating at night, I would just go, what does future me think about this? Okay, I'm not going to do it. Da-da-da-da-da. I mean, this was a hellacious process. Those nights sucked, and there were a lot of them. I wasn't happy during it. It's, I had to learn a whole new kind of mental discipline. It wasn't a magical flow through type of experience. And the same thing has been true for a lot of other things. For money, for me, it was very simple because I just, I think I naturally identify with the state of being somebody who doesn't worry about money. It's just, same thing with, I naturally identify with my current self physically too, but I think because of all of the mental BS and such a long period of time I spent weighing so much more than this, it was really difficult. Plus my mom, I have some issues from growing up because of weight, because of just my relationship with my mom and kind of how she is about it. Whereas with money, I didn't have anybody telling me that money was the root of all evil or that rich people are bad or anything. I just didn't have any blocks in that area. So money, easy. Weight, not so easy, but I still identify with myself as I am now, I think, naturally. But there was a lot of shit I had to go through, and I think it's the same thing with anything else. With me, my biggest area of challenge is people, relationships, and it's been interesting, You know, I've put some things into motion in those areas, and I think that, you know, I don't know why it's so hard for me to speak confidently about this. It's quite fucking obvious to me that my life program that's playing out right now is putting me through the exact things I have to go through in order to get to being the kind of person that I need to be to have what I want. You know, I've never been somebody who was willing to be satisfied in the relationship area with what I see most people as being satisfied with. My issues with relationships have never been that I couldn't get one or keep one or have what everybody else has. I never wanted what everybody else has. I wanted something better. I wanted the best thing that exists in that area. And my problem with having that is feeling like I deserved it. Not just on like a spiritual level, but in general. You know, I wanted to be up to the task in all areas of life. It was definitely a motivator for money. It was a huge motivator for getting my body in good shape. But I think in order to have this wonderful thing that I want, there were other emotional things that I had to go through. For example, you know, I went through a lot of stuff in December with having some realizations about things from childhood, things that were affecting my view of my own value, things that made me feel like I was flawed from birth, things like that. I didn't really know that those were there, and I certainly didn't know that they needed to be addressed before I could have the thing I wanted. And those things just kind of came up organically once I started believing that I had full control over creating that thing that I want. And when I realized that it wasn't going to give me the meaning of life or fulfill me or take away any of my emotional pain or take away the need that I have to figure out what to do with myself for the rest of my life, all that stuff, that there was a lot of weight, I think, that I placed on finding this relationship. And I've since realized that that's not what that thing is going to do for me. It just isn't. So it's dropped in importance. It's become something that I want for what it can actually give me, I think. But all of this to say that, you know, when you really set your intention on something, and it isn't just a thing that you're trying to obtain, when it's something that you really will have to be a different person for, part of the bridge of incidents is going to be a lot of things that bring about change for you. And there's no telling what that's going to be or how it's going to come about. You know, I really couldn't have predicted the number of things that this simple coronavirus global thing has caused a light to be shined on for me. Thankfully, I've done so much work in so many areas that I'm not in any kind of a crisis about anything. But there are things still there that I didn't really know I needed to address. So anyway, I have another video called The Bridge of Incidents May Simply Be You Changing. And I think that is a big part of it for a lot of people. So I'd be wary of anybody telling you that personal exploration and personal examination and changing from one thing to another thing isn't a necessary part of this at all. If you want to get a thing, I think you can do that. But I think if you want to be a different kind of person, you're not going to imagine yourself into that. You're going to identify with it and then be presented with a series of tailor-made experiences where you can either rise to the challenge and become that person or not. I don't know. It hasn't been a cakewalk for me. Other than that, at the end of every day when I go to bed, I feel incredibly grateful most of the time for my life and everything in it and the way everything's played out. There's a sense of beauty about life for me that's kind of always been there. But it hasn't been easy, and there's been a lot of challenging emotional times just trying to shift. So I don't know. That's what I have to say right now. I hope it reaches somebody who needs it.